Okay, welcome to Managerial Accounting. And we're going to start off with terms, okay? Hopefully you've read the book and you have a good handle on direct materials, direct labor, and factory overhead. And right now we're going to put these in different categories so you can understand how they work when we start doing managerial accounting. So we're going to look at prime costs, which include, if you remember, you have direct materials, you have direct labor, and you have factory overhead that go into the cost of a product. If you combine direct materials and direct labor, you have what they call prime costs, because these are the prime costs that are very intrinsic into the product. You have to have those before you can make the product. Other costs are also called conversion costs, which are costs that are used to convert the materials into the product. And that involves direct labor and factory overhead. So direct labor can be both in prime costs and in conversion costs. So it kind of goes both ways. But direct labor is a prime cost under certain circumstances and a conversion cost also. So let's look over here. Wages of the employees that operate the paint equipment. So what do you think those might be? Well, it's a direct labor, and it's definitely a prime cost. It's also a factory overhead. So I guess it might be easier if I did this and did this. And we'll tie those two together so you've got a visual. So that one is going to be both. And wages of the plant manager. Okay, now that's another story. The wages of plant manager, he's not a direct labor. He's only factory overhead. So his wages would be just conversion cost. So steel. So what is steel? Well, steel's a direct material, right? Direct material falls under prime cost. So you kind of get the feel for how this works. So oil used for the assembly line machinery. Now that one's a little bit harder because I can't tie that to the product, a specific product. It's not a material. So that would probably be factory overhead or a conversion cost. Now, I'll let you do the rest of these. Look in the book and see what you find. So our next one is going to be, let's see if I can scoot this down. Go having fun now, right? Hold on. So the next one we look at are direct materials, direct labor, and factory overhead. And my guess is you can pull these right out of the book, but let me give you a little bit of definition first. Direct materials are materials used directly by the product, is intrinsic in the product. Direct labor is used, it's directly traceable to the product, like the assembly people putting it together. And overhead are all costs that relate to the overall production, but not directly traceable to the product, like depreciation, supervisor's salary, anything that is needed to support the manufacturing of that product in the production sense would be factory overhead. So the first one says wages of the employees using the paint. Well, we probably pretty well know that's a direct labor. And then wages of the supervisor. We kind of went through this in the other one, didn't we? So I think you can pull this one off, no problem. If we look at exercise 3, we're looking at period costs versus product costs. So period costs are the bottom part of the income statement. The administrative and the selling costs, the support costs, and the product costs are the costs that are found in cost of goods sold, cost of manufacturing, the goods manufactured, and costs found in inventory. So they're production costs, things that deal with the product. And again, you're going to go right down. So what do you think steel might be? Well, it's probably going to be a product cost, right? Because that's what you use to manufacture. Then you go right down and be able to figure out what's a period cost and what's a product cost. We've got 4, and we're looking at 4. Now we're going to do some calculations. So here's the raw material, purchased, used, direct labor used, overhead used, work in process beginning, and cost of goods manufactured. And what we're going to try to figure out is the work in process at the end of the year. Now, this is a very common calculation, so just kind of relax and fill in the blanks, and then we'll show you the calculation. First of all, how much raw material was used? Well, it says over here 74,300. How much direct labor was used? It was 55,000. What was the factory overhead? It was 95,700. So these are total manufacturing costs right to date. So that's $225,000. That's total manufacturing costs. But for us to figure out the work in process at the end of the year, we've got to take into consideration what was the work in process at the beginning of the year. So we're going to add that in. So this is total work in process right now, less the cost of goods manufactured. This is what we transferred out. So we transferred out $221,800. And now that gives us what's left in work in process at the end of the year, $29,700. So you take all the goods that you put in there. That gives us the total cost that we put in this year. We take into consideration what we had at the beginning of the year. That gives us total available work in process. And then we subtract what we shipped out, which is the cost of goods manufactured. Now this one is going to be, what is it? What's cost of goods sold, which is the second part of that cost of goods manufactured. Let's see how we calculate that. These are all components, and we're going to put these all together in a minute so you can see what they do. So here's our data. We had finished goods. We had work in process again. We had work in process ending. This was the cost of goods manufactured, and this was the finished goods. So let's start at the beginning. What was our cost of goods sold? Well, at the beginning of the year, we had $345,000 in finished goods. Plus, we added cost of goods manufactured, $918,000. So we put that down there. And if you add those two together, that was the total amount of goods you had available. Because we started with this. We added this, so that's our available. So all we have to do is subtract the finished goods here at the end of the year. And we find out that what was sold is the cost of goods sold, $980,100. So this is a way of backing into the cost of goods sold. You take your beginning plus what you add minus what's left to give you the cost of goods sold. And we're going to now do how to do cost of goods manufactured. So we have total manufacturing costs are computed as we add all of our raw materials, all of our direct materials, all of our factory overhead, and that'll give us total manufacturing costs. And that kind of looks like $53,750. And this should actually be total manufacturing costs, because we're not doing cost of goods manufactured here. So these are just what we added to it. Now, if I wanted to go ahead and do that total manufacturing, I'd have to take into consideration the beginning inventory, the beginning work in process, and the ending work in process, and that would tell us what we transferred out. This is just the amount that we worked on here. So where did these numbers come from? Well, this is what we used. Here's our direct labor. And this became this is an overhead cost. Sales commissions doesn't come in on overhead. It is a period cost, remember, and it'll come out at the bottom. Depreciation for the building is going to be an overhead cost. Depreciation for delivery is a sales cost, so that's a period cost. And indirect materials is an overhead. So these are all factory overhead costs that you have to consider. So you have a grand total of $12,750. So that's how you would get the total manufacturing costs. You need to change that there for you so you don't get confused. And finally, we're going to do the very last one. And this is where we're going to do a schedule of goods manufactured, and then we're going to plop that into a cost of goods sold. So now you know how to get the manufactured goods, cost of goods manufactured. You take the direct material, direct labor, factory overhead, and it's going to give us total costs. I'm going to add the work in process. That gives me the total available work in process. And I'm going to subtract the ending process, work in process. And that's going to give me the cost of goods manufactured. So now we can figure out the cost of goods sold. So if I take my beginning, finished goods, add my cost of goods, a cost of manufactured, goods manufactured, subtract my finished goods, if I could get it to move down, subtract that, I come up with a cost of goods sold of $99,750. You're going to do this over and over and over again in this class, so kind of get used to these kinds of procedures. So that is the first chapter. Try the homework. If you have problems with it, email me, and I will do a very short video to help you understand it. Okay, thank you.